While you were scrolling through your phone this morning, something happened that could flip the script on 1.4 billion lives, and honestly, shake Silicon Valley to its knees. Africa just pulled a move no one saw coming. It flipped the switch on its own internet infrastructure. And suddenly, Google is staring at the single biggest threat to its empire since the day it was born. Now pause here, because what I'm about to tell you is not just another tech update you'll forget in 24 hours. No, this is the beginning of the end for Western tech monopolies. And before I'm done, you'll understand why every major tech CEO is holding back-to-back emergency meetings right now. Africans, listen carefully. The first 30 seconds of this story will make you proud. But what I'll reveal in the next 60 seconds? That's the part no one is talking about. The hidden potential that could change not just the internet, but the very fabric of your relationship with it. And trust me, it will be in the most lovely way. Most people think the internet is this magical global space where everyone has equal access to information. But here's the ugly truth. It's a lie. For the past 2 decades, the so-called World Wide Web has been nothing but a gated playground, controlled by a handful of Western giants. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they've been the landlords. Africa, the tenant, paying rent for every single click, every single byte of data. But here's where it gets interesting. That era just ended. The African Union officially launched the Continental Internet Exchange. And no, this isn't just another internet service provider. This is a parallel internet infrastructure, a clean break, a digital revolution that completely bypasses Western-controlled systems. Think of it like this. Imagine Africa decided to build its own superhighway system instead of paying tolls to use foreign-owned roads. That's exactly what just happened. Except here, the highways are fiber optics, the tolls are billions in digital fees, and the prize is total freedom over the modern economy. Now, here's where things get crazier. Let me pull back the curtain on how the internet really works. When someone in Lagos wants to search Google, their request doesn't travel directly. No, it actually bounces across undersea cables, data centers, and exchange points owned by, you guessed it, Western corporations. That data might even travel thousands of miles to servers in Europe or North America before crawling back to Africa. It's kind of like mailing a letter to your neighbor, by first shipping it across an ocean. This broken system created 3 massive chokeholds on Africa's progress. First, cost Africans pay some of the highest internet prices in the world because they're paying rent for someone else's pipes. Second, speed. It's slow, unreliable, and laggy because the data is forced to take the scenic route. And third, control. Every message, every email, every search. Western companies have had unprecedented surveillance and control. But here's where things take a turn. The Continental Internet Exchange isn't just fixing those problems, it's rewriting the rules of the game. Instead of bouncing traffic through Western systems, African data now stays in Africa. A whole network of data centers, fiber optic cables, and exchange points, spanning 54 nations, keeps the traffic homegrown. Someone in Kenya searching a site hosted in South Africa. That data never leaves the continent. Ever. Now let me blow your mind for a second. 100,000 kilometers of fiber have already been laid out. 47 mega data centers have been built. Exchange points are planted in every major African city. This isn't just some pilot program. This is a continent-wide infrastructure that honestly rivals what Silicon Valley spent decades building. But wait, because here's where it gets even wilder. The real power isn't actually in the hardware. It's in the software. The Continental Internet Exchange runs on a brand new system called the African Digital Protocol. And get this, it's completely incompatible with Western internet protocols. Translation? Well, Google's language doesn't work here. Western apps, they just don't run smoothly here. Africa has literally built its own digital language, one that only Africans speak fluently. And that's when Google's nightmare begins. For 20 years, Google's dominance has rested on one thing: owning the infrastructure and protocols that make search possible. But you know, the African Digital Protocol flips the table. Instead of Google's indexing, it uses distributed knowledge mapping. And you know, this system doesn't just prioritize speed, it prioritizes African content, African languages, African perspectives. Here's an example. Search African history. On Google, you get results filtered by Western narratives, Western voices, Western angles. But on the African internet, you get results curated by African universities, researchers, and institutions in local languages, with context that actually matters. Now stop and think. That may sound like a small tweak, but to Google, it's a terrifying existential threat. If 1.4 billion Africans suddenly prefer a search system that serves them better than Google does, well, that's not just lost market share. That's an empire collapsing. But here's the kicker, it doesn't stop with search. The Continental Internet Exchange built African versions of everything: email, cloud storage, video platforms, and advertising networks. Every service Google offers? Well, Africa now has a faster, cheaper, locally relevant alternative. The stakes? Oh, they're astronomical. Right now, Africa spends $50 billion a year on Western digital services. That's money siphoned out of the continent, straight into Silicon Valley shareholders' pockets. But now, that $50 billion stays right here. It funds African engineers, African data centers, and African startups, and every single dollar recirculates to multiply the economy instead of draining it. Here's where you really need to sit up. The timing of this move? Not random. Africa is the youngest continent in the world, over 60% under 25. Digital natives who grew up online but were forced to use systems never designed for them. Now, for the first time, they're getting digital tools in their own languages, built for their own needs on their own soil. And the adoption numbers? Honestly, they're absolutely shocking. In just 3 days since launch, more than 200 million Africans switched to the Continental Internet Exchange. That's actually faster adoption than Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok have ever seen in their entire history. Why? Well, because for Africans, it simply works better. Meanwhile, Google is in panic mode, but they're stuck. They can't buy their way in. They can't copy it. The African Digital Protocol is open source, but it only works inside Africa's parallel internet. For Google to compete, they'd have to build a whole new internet from scratch. That's like hundreds of billions of dollars. And honestly, decades of work. And while Google hesitates, other regions are watching closely. Asia, South America, even Europe. Because the question is no longer can Africa do it. The real question is, what happens when the rest of the world joins in?